The 2024 NHL Draft has come and gone with 8 new players added to the Maple Leafs prospect pipeline, in addition to a top pair shutdown defenseman for the now. We'll break it all down on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. A little bonus episode for all of y'all today on the Locked On Leafs show. I know, typically we're Monday to Friday, each and every weekday, but when busy stuff such as the NHL Draft rolls through, we work a little overtime for all y'all. So busy couple of days for the Buds, making 8 draft selections in total. They picked up another pick for next year's draft as well, and also made a couple draft day trades in the process, Dave. And let's not bury the lead here. As great as those draft picks may turn out to be and become down the road, I think we all know that the immediate impactful ad that was done late in the draft today was adding or at least acquiring the rights of pending unrestricted free agent Chris Tanev for a 2026 7th round pick and forward Max Ellis, who is also having his contract expire on July 1st and was not expected to return to the Maple Leafs anyway. So basically, the future 7th round to get an extra 48 hours of exclusive negotiating rights with Chris Tanev. What did you make of that deal by Brad Treliving?
It caught me off guard because, we're watching everything kind of going down today, and people just like, is Brad awake? Brad okay? Like the Leafs were they're being booed because it was taking forever for whatever was going on with number 58 to get that trade down with Florida. Like, it was almost like, are these guys awake? Do they need a Dave to make them a little espresso to get them going, get the juices flowing? But they finally did. And a lot of people, I'm sure, didn't expect the Tanev's rights to get traded. I certainly wasn't one of those people. I just thought maybe this is something that was just going to go right down to the wire heading into July 1st. But I think Dallas got the inclination that, you know what, let's if we can't come to an agreement, we might as well get something back, even if it's a 7th round pick.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Dallas got to a point where they gave their best offer, and Chris Tanev said, "No, I'm still going to go and test out free agency," and they decided to move on. I think also trading him to Toronto, a place that he obviously has interest in going to, that Toronto has interest in bringing him in. So did they get a whole lot for him? No, a future 7th round pick. So you could look at it as Dallas kind of doing good by the player as well, sending him somewhere that he probably plans on signing anyways. Seems to be a lot. And look, we all know that I'm a big fan of Chris Tanev. I know that you like Chris Tanev as well. And there does seem to be kind of two sides of the argument for when it comes to Chris Tanev and whether or not he should be a member of the Maple Leafs. I personally do like him as a player. And look, a lot of people not sure if the Leafs should really go out and sign a 34-year-old often injured defenseman. And it's a fair conversation to have. And it's been thrown out there by a lot of insiders that, the AAV may not be as high as you would think, because the Maple Leafs, one of the few teams that would be willing to just give him term and then just not really care about those last 3-4 years on that deal and just try and get the player in at a reasonable cost. And then they'll be able to have a solid Chris Tanev for the foreseeable future, and a player that kind of the Leafs have lacked, that they've always kind of needed, a partner for Morgan Rielly, the perfect partner for Morgan Rielly. I'm a big fan of the trade, and it sounds as though he's going to sign somewhere between a 5 to 7 year deal. And like I said, most people 7 years for a full 34-year-old. Well, why would you do that? Well, here's why. Realistically, he's not going to play out the full 7 years. Okay. That's probably going to be the case. But it allows you to buy down the AAV. This is a capture convention is really what the Maple Leafs are doing here. It's kind of similar to when, Ilya Kovalchuk signed a 15-year contract or whatever it was with the New Jersey Devils years ago and had no intention of playing out the final few years of that contract. And you saw it was extremely front loaded with just like basically league minimum the last 4 or 5 years of the deal in order to buy down the AAV. That's what I believe they're looking to do here with Chris Tanev. So if they sign him to a 7-year deal in the range of, let's say, 7 years at $21 million, you can get it down to a $3 million contract. And pretty much the way you could do it is you could pay him $6 million in actual salary dollars through the first 3 years of the deal, and then just pay him $1 million for the final 3-4 years of the contract. And all of a sudden, boom, you've got yourself a Chris Tanev at a very reasonable $3 million cap hit, whether he plays out those final few years, lands on LTIR, Robidas Island, you could trade it because the money is very insignificant at that point. It is well worth it. And it's a problem for 4 years down the line, Dave. 4 years down the line. I'm very okay if that's the contract structure that the Maple Leafs try and go in to try and lure in Chris Tanev at a low cap hit, leaving them even more money to go out and make additional deals on July 1st.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I know people are gonna say again, Leafs have to either overpay or do something that maybe other teams wouldn't have to do, but the Leafs are at a point right now. Defense is their priority. We heard Brad Gilligan kind of speak about it today. They know that they need to get help on the blue line. So guess what? If it takes giving Chris Tanev a few extra years, go and get it done. And if it means also he's going to come at a more reasonable cap it, get it done. When I hear people say, "Oh, 7 years," like I don't see a 34-year-old playing out a 7-year deal, especially one with that's had the miles that Chris Tanev has had. Like players know in their mind how long they want to go for, and it's now become standard in the NHL that once you get past kind of that 38, 37, 38 age range, it's better to have kind of that security of that contract in place so that you can enjoy the rest of you'll have a nice little retirement bonus, we'll call it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's okay. Just stay at home, get paid $1 million or whatever to be at home, and we'll chuck you on LTIR. All good. And look, for someone who is off injured like Chris Tanev, it's not going to surprise people if 3 or 4 years down the road he's just not willing to put his body through what he's done over the last few years as he gets into the late stages of his 30s. So it would just make sense for him to say, I just can't do it anymore. The body shutting down on me. And then it's an easy shift over that. Like it's blatant cap circumvention. Like we are talking about it here. But it's a loophole that the NHL left. The one thing that the Leafs are able to flex their, basically flex their money, like the fact that they're the richest team in the NHL, is the one way that they can actually take advantage of that. Right. So I've got no issues with it. Obviously, the Leafs are going to take a hard run over the next 48 hours to get something done with Chris Tanev. Don't be surprised to see him, for max term somewhere between 5 and 7 years. It is not going to surprise me. And it's not a bad thing if that means that it buys down that AAV for them to do some more work. I will say, and I'm going to actually credit Jeff Viette, strong, longtime member of Leafs Twitter. He did actually tweet something out that made me think about maybe the one concern I would have over this. He said that the only wrinkle is that the new CBA is going to be consummated in 2026, and there's already been rumblings about them possibly looking at filling in those loopholes that are available for LTIR cap maneuvering and cap circumvention. That would be the one thing that might scare you in 3 or 4 years. If they do close off those loopholes that we're talking about and they don't kind of grandfather these contracts, then maybe things get a little bit dicey at that point. But even then, like $3 million isn't a crazy amount to be paying him. But That's the only kind of concern you might have. A couple quotes, I guess we could tell you from Brad Treliving post game. We'll hear from him in a minute when he talks about their first round pick. But when talking about Chris Tanev, called him an elite defensive player, an absolute warrior, culture carrier for the room, and he did acknowledge the age. He said, "I know the age that he's at, but he showed last year he's still one of the top shutdown defensemen in the league." And it's absolutely true. The way that he was able to play up until the injury in the playoffs, he was shutting down everybody. You look at the amount of goals he was on the ice for prior to that Stanley Cup final against Edmonton. The answer was this. He was an absolute dog and shut down everyone. And we're talking about Vegas Golden Knights in round one, the Colorado Avalanche in round two. Guy wasn't on the ice for any goals, and he had the tough minutes shutting down the Eichels, the Stones, the McKinnons, the Rantanens. He was a dog. So bringing that to Toronto, I don't think anyone should have an issue with it. I think that it's a pretty good move, and gave up nothing to get it done either.
Yeah, like again, what's the downside? You gave up a 7th round pick when you have a abundance of 7th round picks. Like, yeah. I don't see the downside of that.
It's easy to acquire 7th round picks. Like the Maple Leafs,
they literally acquired one today.
Yeah,
they acquired.
It was the last pick in the draft, but they got it. All right, let's take a break. Let's come back and let's get into the draft haul. 8 players selected, headlined by Ben Danford, the 31st overall selection. We'll break down all of the players. We'll hear from Brad Treliving as well. That's all coming up next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports so much. I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I got to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. The Jays finally looking like their bats are starting to roll around. You can still make some wagers on the Jays over on the FanDuel app. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. Although today's a Saturday, it's a special bonus episode. We're recapping what went down at the 2024 NHL Draft. We just discussed the acquisition of the rights to sign Chris Tanev, but we all expect for that deal to come down at some point prior to July 1st. And they also made 8 selections in the draft over the course of the 2-day event. Made 1 in round 1, made 1 in round 4, 3 in round 5, and 3 in round 7. So let's go one by one and kind of discuss. They also picked up an additional 2nd round pick, by the way, in next year's draft, the Panthers pick in 2025, which was a pretty solid piece of business. We can get into that as we break down the 1st round pick from the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was Ben Danford. The Leafs traded back from 23, traded down 8 spots, picked up a 2nd round pick in the draft this year, but then later flipped it and turned it into a 2025 2nd round pick. And they also picked up an additional 7th rounder, which turned out to be the final pick in the draft as well. So Ben Danford was the Leafs' 1st round selection. He's a right-handed defenseman. He is 6'2", 190 pounds, plays for the Oshawa Generals. Smooth skating, 2-way defenseman, very high effort level at all times, competitive kid, plays the body well, high IQ player, very high IQ player. He's physical, not afraid to put his body in front of pucks and block shots, excellent puck retrieval skills as well. And he's got the ability to make that outlet pass out of the zone. You hear from his coaches and teammates and other scouts you talk to, they say he's a high character guy. Wore an A on his sweater this year. Some believe that he could potentially wear the C next year, if I think it's Callum Ritchie's currently the captain there, if he's not with the Gens next year, he would be next in line. He was ranked as the second best defensive defenseman in the OHL this year. And if you ask him what he still needed to work on, last night he told reporters that he believes he still needs to develop some of his offensive game, which projects better than his stats indicated, according to most scouts. He had just 1 goal, 15 assists for 16 points this year for the Oshawa Generals. But he did score twice at the CHL Top Prospects game, however, Dave. So that is, something that he can hang on his hat. Here's the thing with Ben Danford, though, Dave. Here's the thing. Similar to last year, you had a lot of people looking at the pick, looking at the selection, looking at where he was picked, number 31, and then immediately trying to match it up with where other pundits had him ranked in their draft rankings. And much like last year, lots of people had him ranked as a bottom of the second round player, and the Leafs took him around early, so they say. And that was kind of the narrative that was running around last night. He was ranked as the 58th player on Bob McKenzie's board. He was ranked as the 78th player on Craig Button's board. But Elite Prospect had him ranked as the highest. He was the 30th ranked player by Elite Prospects. But despite all of that, the Toronto Maple Leafs wanted Ben Danford. They liked Ben Danford. According to both Brad Treliving and Wes Clark, he was the selection all along. He would have been the guy they took at 23. They figured they could drop back a little bit and still get him at 31. And Ben Danford is the newest first-round pick of the Toronto Maple Leafs. What did you make of the pick, Dave?
Well, I liked the pick. I knew they were going defenseman. It just seemed like that was just what they were targeting the entire time. I have a bone to pick with you, though, because when the Leafs traded back with Anaheim, and I had a feeling Stian Solberg was going to be the pick, there was a couple guys still on the board that I thought would have been, that we even spoke about on the podcast, that were very much in the running here. We get a few picks away from the Leaf selection. And doesn't our good friend here, Mike, go out and say EJ Emery still on the board here with a couple of picks, which it was, only for Mike to get all of our hopes up, and he goes at 30th overall to the New York Rangers. You tempted the hockey god, and hockey god just gave us a big old slap in the face.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Emery, obviously, EJ Emery was the player that both Dave and I kind of targeted as like our top selection. He was the guy who we took in our Locked On NHL mock draft, and he got all the way to pick 30 and then was selected by the New York Rangers right ahead of Danford and the Leafs at 31. However, like I said, and this, I don't know, maybe this was just Wes Clark blowing smoke, trying to make it seem like he was the guy all along. But if you ask him, which the media did, he said Ben was pretty much the target all the way along. And he also came out and said, or was it Tree Living? Hold on. Yeah, Tree Living. We were hopeful that we could dip back and still get him where we got him. So even if Emery was available at 31, it sounds like they still would have taken Ben Danford.
Yeah, it's interesting. I personally would have gone with EJ Emery, but obviously they know a lot more about these guys than obviously we do. And like, well, look, no, go ahead.
I was saying, why do we hear from Brad Treliving? Because he broke down his thoughts on Ben Danford after the draft. Someone asked him, his thoughts on him, his little scattering report, and why he was the selection for the Maple Leafs at 31. Here's what general manager Brad Treliving had to say.
Sorry? What do you like most about Ben? Well, Ben's a guy that our staff was real passionate about all year, and specifically when you go through the process of putting your list together and you're digging in on it. He was a target that the group had, and obviously you want to see how the board falls. I think I talked about earlier of trying to get picks. I know Wes was nervous when I started talking about all these great ideas I had about trading down and hoping we didn't get gapped up with the player. So that was you listen. The scouts are the ones that really know the players, right? They're the ones that put in the time. You trust your staff. We were able to get a second out of it, and we're hopeful of just doing the homework that you do that we could get him where we got him. And but I've seen the player lots, watched a lot of video on him as well. I think he's an underrated player right now. He skates so well, the way he defends, he's able to gap up, his puck retrievals. I think the offensive side of his game is still going to grow. He's a hard defender, high character guy, very competitive, lots to like with him. We were really excited about the pick.
How important was this last second round next year?
So there you go. So, I do think that there's merit to it when he talks about when we were, he said the work we put in, we realized that he still probably would be there at pick 31. And that's the reason why they dropped back, picked up that extra second round pick, and still got the player that they wanted. I believe that because if they wanted EJ Emery or Stian Solberg, you would have had to think that moving back to 31, odds are both of those players are going to be gone. So if you had either of those two ranked considerably higher or definitively higher, I suppose, and not just in the same cluster as Ben Danford, you think they probably would have just stuck at 23 and selected one of those two players. They obviously either felt that Danford was just on even playing field as those guys, or maybe was actually the preferred selection for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, and look, there's and part of me thinks that when you go with the pick that not many expect, right, a little in a lot of ways off the board, because in our top 50, I think we had a top 50 of prospects that our guys at Locked On NHL Prospects made. I was like, oh, let me go and I'll go post the video for Ben Danford. I don't like this, and I'm like, oh no, sorry, we don't have video.
Yeah.
So like that kind of shows that, you know what, like, rankings are one thing, but the staff have their own desire on, guys that they think, fit well with what their development system is like, right? And I think what I like most about Ben Danford too is he's on the young side, like, right? And so there's a lot of growth that can happen here with him, playing for a good team in Oshawa, right? I know that they got smoked in the OHL final by London, but funny enough, in the game that they lost 8-1 to the London Knights, he was a +1 because he scored and was not on the ice for a goal against.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty impressive.
And I don't think, I'm glad you brought that up, actually, playoff success. I mean, yes, they lost in the OHL Cup final, but going all the way to the final, playing those big minutes, those high leverage minutes, being a top player for the Oshawa Generals there, leading them that deep into a playoff run, like that goes a long way with this Maple Leaf staff. Like Wes Clark, if you look at kind of the themes that we've seen from a lot of their top end draft picks over the last few years, they take a lot of stock into what happens like after March, right? The second half of the season onward and through the playoffs. They take a lot of stock in that. That's where, they looked at Easton Cowan and the kind of meteoric rise he had his final few months leading up to the draft, and a great playoff that he had in his draft year. And they said, screw it. He's ranked, high 50s everywhere else. We think that he's on a trajectory to do even better things. We're going to take him right here because we think that he's great when you look at what he was able to do, in the most recent time. And look at what he did. Went and won in themselves an OHL MVP in the regular season and in the playoffs, and brought them to within a goal of a Memorial Cup championship. So, they're kind of thinking the same thing, right? Late riser. Matthew Nyes was a late riser as well. When they selected him, they liked his back half of the season when they took him as well. I'm pretty sure actually even Fraser Minton was ranked, like 15 or 16 slots lower than where he ended up going. So another guy who they liked the back half of his season. So, it's just a theme that Wes Clark and his scouts seem to have, and they liked what they saw out of Ben Danford and the strong playoff that he had, and they're hoping it continues into next year. I can tell you something, Dave. We might have to check out a Jens game next season though, and go get our peepers locked in on Ben Danford live for ourselves. I think we'll have to do that. Maybe make it like a Locked On Leafs trip out to the Schwa.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I've never been to an Oshawa Generals game, actually.
Me neither. I've
been to a London Knights game. I've been to Mississauga Steelheads, and I've been to a Brampton Beats game, and there was a Brampton Battalion
Mhm.
at the time, but I've never been to a Oshawa Generals game, so good reason to go now.
We'll make it happen. We'll go get a look at Ben Danford. All right, on the other side, we'll take a look at the rest of the Maple Leafs draft pick throughout from day 2, and we'll take a look at everything else, all the craziness and big trades that went down on day 2 as well. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a special post-draft edition of the show. We're breaking down all 8 selections made by the Toronto Maple Leafs today. We just went through their first selection in the first round. It was Ben Danford, the right-handed defenseman from the Oshawa Generals. And then we had to wait all the way until pick 120. They did technically have pick 58 late in the second round that they traded and ended up picking up a draft pick next year, second round pick next year, which I think was a pretty smart move because they didn't pick until the 5th round next year. So now you pick up a second, which you can either use that pick in the draft or trade fodder for the deadline. If you want to go out and grab a half decent player, got to have draft picks. And I'm not sure you're going to get a very useful piece with a 5th rounder. So having a second to trade definitely helps out as well.
It does. You talk about draft capital, not just even maybe to draft, but even use it in other deals, right? Like we talked about how the cupboards were pretty bare, right? And you need those. Yeah, you have your 4th, 5th. Sometimes you can find a player there, but you want the bullets in the chamber in the earlier rounds where you have a little more of a guarantee to get them done. And look, scouts also want draft picks, so it makes their job a little easier to go and find quality players for the team, right? So I think it only makes sense for it in this draft, especially if that second round pick was actually a bonus, right, for moving back. Might as well use it to get. I'm a little surprised maybe they didn't get it for next year. I guess Anaheim wasn't willing to give up a 25 second, but
wasn't it 2025?
Well, and the one that Anaheim traded, the 58 for 58, right? I thought maybe it would have made sense if Florida, they got it from Florida. It would have been smart if Toronto could have gone Anaheim's, but I don't think Anaheim would have done that.
Yeah. Maybe they didn't have one. I don't know. We have to check, but yeah, you're right. All right, let's keep it going here. So again, they picked at number 31, then we had to wait all the way till pick 120. And the next guy the Maple Leafs selected was Victor Johansson, who's a left shot defenseman, 5'11". Dave, he's listed at 143 pounds on Elite Prospects. I thought that's strange. So I went to NHL Central Scouting Registry. He was listed at 137 pounds there. What are the Maple Leafs and Brad Treliving doing drafting a 5'11", 140-pound defenseman out of Sweden?
Maybe they thought there was an error there, and they're just like, maybe he's a little bigger than we anticipate. I was shocked when I saw that, just because he doesn't scream the we want to be big and lanky and tough to play against. I mean, look, you can be a small player and be tough to play against as well, I guess. But yeah, this is not scream at Brad Treliving draft pick. It was almost like, hey, Kyle, did you just steal like the phone for a second there? Like,
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I would assume that this was a pick where whoever, so he came from, was it Vax Joe? Was he like Vax Joe junior team in the Swedish Allsvenskan? I believe that's where he came from. I would imagine that's a player and a pick where whoever the area scout is there was banging the table, and they're like, look, this guy's small, he's young, he's raw, but he's got talent. Wes Clark, their director of scouting, said he's very early in his development curve. He's got strong intelligence. He's competitive and excellent defensive instincts. And he said brothers have shown well over the years as well. So they looked at the family tree and they saw, okay, he's got a father who played pro hockey in the Swedish league for a very long time, represented the Swedes at the World Hockey Championships in, I think it was the 98 and 2002 World Hockey Championships. His brother Anton was drafted in the 4th round last year by the Red Wings, and he's the cousin of Alex Venberg. So they look at it, there's family ties of success when it comes to playing hockey at the pro level. And they saw this kid and they said, okay, maybe there's something here if we can cultivate this young raw talent. One of the scouting reports I read up on Johansson said he's extremely undersized, but seems to have great mobility and has the ability to move the puck. Surely he'll need to add a lot more bulk and size to his frame to have any amount of success on North American ice, where things are going to get a lot smaller and tighter, and that lack of size will certainly show up here more so than it does on the big ice surfaces in Sweden. So interesting selection there. He had 2 goals, 6 assists for 8 points in 34 games this past season. Racked up 22 PIMs in 5 playoff games, though. That is interesting. To rack, 5 playoff games, 22 PIMs. What was this guy up to, picking up that amount of penalty minutes? But felt like a bit of a reach, I guess you could say. But the Leafs seem to like the player in the pick. You got any comments on Victor Johansson?
Yeah, I mean, for a guy who's 6'1", I hope he kind of adds a little bit of bulk to his game. Because someone with that size, you're kind of hoping for a little more there. But yeah, I just know there's not too much on him, especially because he's playing for the Swedish, in the junior league. So again, one of those picks where I think it's gonna be a little while since we see him anywhere close to being a potential to come on over, if that's eventually where things kind of end up for him.
Feels like that's going to be the case for a lot of these guys. That a couple of times Wes Clark, when asked about these prospects, came out and said, they're a few years away. We'll see. Like, lots of dart throws at the draft this year. At pick number 151, the third selection that the Maple Leafs made in the draft, they took Miroslav Holinka, a center prospect, right-handed center prospect, I might add, a position that there's not much depth in the Maple Leafs organization. 6'1", 185 pounds, played in the Czech Junior League this past season. He had 20 goals, 21 assists in 29 games there, with 14 points in 15 playoff games. Did get a 16-game stint up in the men's league where he scored a goal, had 2 helpers for 3 points in 16 games. He was also a member of the Czechia's World Junior team this past year with 2 assists in 3 games played. Ranked as high as 87th by hockeyprospect.com. And he was ranked as the 32nd European skater by Central Scouting. The scouting report that I got from Holinka is 2-way centerman, sound positioning, high hockey IQ, help support his D as an outlet option in the defensive zone by not leaving the zone early, plays well below the goal line with great playmaking vision, does get knocked around a little bit against physical defensemen down low, loses puck battles, will need to improve on that in North America when the space shrinks even more, and he's an average skater at best. So that's Miroslav Holinka, the Maple Leafs fifth round pick they took at number 151. And Wes Clark did mention in his post draft availability that they are actually expecting for Miroslav Holinka to come overseas and play in the play over on North America ice next year, as opposed to the Czech League. And I would imagine, I don't know who has his rights in the CHL, who took him in the import draft. I could look that up in a moment possibly, but I would imagine he'd be in the Canadian Hockey League. If not, I guess that he would be AHL, ECHL bound. But regardless, looks like he's going to play next season in North America, which definitely would be great for his development, considering he's played overseas his entire career.
Yeah, I mean, I think that always kind of plays into what the Leafs kind of do, or what teams kind of do with their drafts, right? If they feel like a player is going to show up a little earlier, then you know what? It gives us a better reason to go and get this guy a little earlier, right? Maybe some other teams would consider as well. And we know that with players that play overseas, that's always the risk of, okay, are they going to sign a new deal with the team that they're playing with in Europe? Like, do they want to come to North America? Especially like when they get a chance to make some money, right? Playing for these European leagues. It says something when a player's like, you know what? We'd rather come over and give ourselves a better chance of making it, whether that's in the AHL or ECHL or NHL. kind of says
Right.
a little more about the player too.
Next up, the Maple Leafs had the very next pick in the draft at number 152. Oh boy, I'm gonna butcher this name. They couldn't have picked more difficult names in these like three selections here. Alexander Pleskvik. Is that what we're going with? It's Plesovskikh. Pleskvik.
Yeah, Pleskovic. Like your guess. You're much better with the names than I am, so I always defer to you on that. But yeah.
Yeah, tough Russian last name there. He's a left winger, 6'2", 175 pounds. Played in the MHL this past season for the Mamonti Ugri. He had 8 goals, 9 assists for 17 points in 33 games. He late birthday, so still just 17 years old until August. So a little bit of a younger player. So a bit more of a project. Played at the Hlinka this past year. He had 5 goals, 2 assists for 7 points in 6 games there. Ranked as the 95th European skater by Central Scouting. He is a left winger, but shoots right-handed. And the quote that I got, Scouting Report, is he utilizes his size and range to his advantage, dominating battles, suffocating breakouts, and quickly shifting from getting the puck to distributing it. That's from the Elite Prospects Draft Guide. And he projects more like a forechecking bottom 6 winger as he does, for anything else. And it does seem like that was maybe what the goal was here for the Maple Leafs. Get a couple guys who've got much more, size to them for the most part in this draft outside of Johansson. I think every player was 6'1", 6'2", or above. So they got, much added size to their prospect pool. And Clark talking about actually, no, that wasn't about Plaskovich, but yeah, so that's I can't say that. I'm not going to say the name again because I'm gonna butcher it. But pick number 52, Alexander P. Anything about this guy?
I mean, this is why I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta get out of the depth of and it's funny hearing some of the draft announced today. Like, they got a hockey player. I'm like, I'm hoping so, because I don't know if you heard some of those ones. Like,
I know, it's like that's a hockey player. It's like, you don't say. I thought maybe they were looking in the bowling ranks, looking for someone to come and play some puck. Huh. Although I did see, who was it? There was actually a player that they were talking about. Was it Liam Greentree? Maybe. Oh, there's a player apparently that had like 5 D1 football scholarship offers, and he said, "No, I want to play hockey instead of D1 football." So I can't remember who it was, but it was someone in the first round. I thought maybe he played for the Spitties, so it could have been Greentree. But anyways, with their next pick, not too far down, 7 selections later, they took a goaltender, the one and only goalie that they had in the draft this year, Timofey Obvintsev. 6'4", 180 pounds, played in the MHL this past season. He's an overage goaltender. He's born January of 2005, but he played just 6 games last year, so he ended up going undrafted. Plays for the Krasnaya Amira Moskva, of the MHL. This past season in 16 games, he had a 296 goals against and a 921 save percentage. The scouting report that I've read said he's got raw talent, but extremely athletic. Could have the highest ceiling among all goalies if he could refine his raw skills. That was from hockeyprospect.com. So there seems to be some big supporters of this big Russian goaltender. And look, the Leafs have done pretty well over the last few seasons drafting Russian goalies out of this league. You think about Akhtyamov, you think Vlashy Peksa, and now Obvintsev, the latest Russian goaltender that they're hoping can turn into a decent prospect for them. Additional to the raw talent and extreme athleticism, they talk about his good lateral mobility and his ability to extend his leg and arms to make tough stops. And he's got a really strong blocker as well, but does tend to play more of a stand-up style more often than scouts want, given his size. He'll have to work on that going forward. So that's the report there on Timofey Obvintsev, the Russian 6'4" netminder.
Yeah, big boy. But again, the Leafs have really targeted a lot of Russian goaltenders in the last few drafts. I mean, that's just kind of where all the top goaltenders in the world are coming out of right now, right? So you kind of have to.
You're developing them right. It makes sense to go to that well.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not creating nothing in Canada. Go to Russia. That's where you get all the good goalies.
Yeah, so I have obviously no issue with that. Again, another interesting one where like how long is he going to stay in Russia for? I know he played in the junior league. I don't know who owns his KHL rights or if that's even an option for him right now. Usually Elite Prospects is pretty good at saying which team owns his K. I think it was CSK Moscow. That probably makes a lot of sense. I think that's where he played all of his juniors. But again, I don't know if that's changed at all. So it'll be interesting to see there. That's always a risk when you take in the Russian. Does he eventually want to stay there? Does he see a reason to move over to North America?
Yeah. Next up, moving into the 7th round, the Leafs at pick number 200 selected Matt Leahy. Boy, there's going to be a lot of trailer park memes with that. Matt Leahy, left shot defenseman, 6'5", 203 pounds out of the BCHL. He's committed to Clarkson University next year. Played for the Nanaimo Clippers this past season. 2 goals, 17 assists for 19 points in 54 games, which is an increase and improvement from the 1 assist that he had last year in just 34 games. So there you go. Like, that's what we're talking about. The Maple Leafs, they look at, what have you done for me lately? How have you been able to improve over the last 6 months? Because that's the trajectory that we see you having here. He was ranked as the 110th best North American skater by Central Scouting. And he's a big body, physical, defensive defenseman. Obviously, at 6'5", 203 pounds. And Elite Prospects, their scouting report on him was, Leahy is not just a physical force, but a strategic player who intelligently leverages his size advantages. His defensive style isn't really centered around cataclysmic hits, but about disrupting the game. He excels at sealing the boards, often pinning puck carriers, trapping feet, and forcing pucks to the outside, showcasing his cerebral approach to the game. I like the sounds of that. I really do like the sounds of that. That sounds like a good, base for a defensive prospect.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where, I mean, the BCHL is a pretty solid league when you look at players that have come out of the BCHL, and the NCAA is like, you see how many players now are coming out of the NCAA. I'm curious to see how many more players will go down this route, especially if it means that the money of down the road now, in some ways, getting a year off your ELC, like we've seen with a lot of players right now doing. So yeah, it's again another one of those picks where I'm sure we'll hear something later in the year with how he's going. I know he has a late birthday. I think he's 17, he has his birthday in July. So another one of those young guys that come out of the draft.
Young big boy. And Wes Clark, when asked about him, he said 6'5", very strong defensively, very physical. That was it. That was the scouting report. Matt Leahy. Love to hear that, obviously. Next up was Sam McHugh at pick number 216. He's a left winger, 6'2", 187 pounds, from the Owen Sound Attack of the OHL. Another guy who had just 1 assist a season ago through 33 games and then improved those numbers this season. Had 23 goals, 14 assists for 37 points in 68 games this year. Split between Peterborough and Owen Sound. Had a midseason trade going from Peterborough to Owen Sound, and saw a much bigger role for him there once the trade went down. He's got a high compete level, doesn't shy away from physicality, engages in board battles, not too much skill, but projects as a bottom 6 or a depth AHL type of player. And Wes Clark, when asked about Sam McHugh, said 6'2" winger, scored 23 goals this year, has an edge to his game. And he said that I couldn't quite hear the area scout he was referring to, but he said his area scout really banged the table for him. So whoever was scouting the OHL in that region really, really likes Sam McHugh as a
Give me him.
prospect. Yeah.
I can only
So-
imagine what that's like to be on that. We don't always see it because guys are usually pretty subdued at the when they're on camera at the draft. But I just want to see
Wow.
that one scout that's just going, we need to get this guy. But I think it's more of a figure speech banging on the table because if you see a guy,
No. That's not a figure that happens. It's just in the draft. It's in the draft meetings the weeks prior, right? When they're putting up their list. I mean, they've got their list at that point, right? Like they've got their rankings.
right?
But while they're in the mix of making those rankings, I guarantee you there's guys out there saying, I'm telling you, Sam McHugh's going to be the next 7th round all-star right where he's the next Patrick Hornqvist. You watch, you're going to, you know what I mean? Like I guarantee you those conversations are happening. And so this guy thinks Sam McHugh is going to be a decent piece, or at least there's something to mold. He's a good piece of clay that got some molding to him. And again, we're talking about a team that stresses. What have you done for me lately? Last year, 0 goals, 1 assist. This year, what did he progress into? 23 goals and 37 points. That's a good increase. Really good increase, right? From 0 to 23 goals in one season. What can he do with another year under his belt? And at 6'2", 187 pounds, 190 pounds, he's got good size. So worthwhile flyer there in the 7th round, I think, on Sam McHugh. And with the final selection that the Maple Leafs made in this draft, and the final selection in the draft in general, Mr. Irrelevant, as they call him in the NFL. I don't think they call him that in the NHL. They should, though. It's a really funny term. Nathan Mays. Yeah, exactly. Shout out Brock Purdy. Nathan Mays, left-handed defenseman, another big boy, 6'4", 194 pounds, coming from the WHL Spokane Chiefs. This year, 68 games, had just 1 goal, 15 assists. And Mays is a hard-hitting, aggressive defender who makes the occasional play on the breakout. He brings a bit of rush defense value, off puck threat elimination, retrieval skill, and a lot of violence. If he can't win the positioning battle, he still overpowers opponents and traps them along the boards. So that's Nathan Mays for you. The final selection in the 2024 NHL entry draft, and the 8th and final selection for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there's the class, Dave. There's the class. And can't forget that they also picked up another 2nd round pick in next year's draft as well.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how they use that extra draft capital they got from the 1st rounder to really, magnify losing out on Stian Solberg, because I know a lot of people in the Discord were very upset about not getting the chance to get Stian. So
Yeah. Well, time will tell, right? Time will tell. A couple of years down the line, we'll be able to look back and we'll have a better idea of how that move kind of played out. But does it hurt a little more that the trade was made with the Anaheim Ducks? Remember the last time the Ducks and Leafs made a 1st round swap? It was opposite this time, though, right? This time
it was opposite, but it was not any better.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, at the time, Tyler Biggs, people thought was going to be a good player. No one knew who the hell John Gibson and Ricard Raquel were at the time. Actually, John Gibson was a very well-known goaltender. But you know what I'm saying. You know what I mean. We'll see. We'll see down the road, I guess. I mean, here's the thing with Solberg, right? You don't know what you're going to get in him, right? Like, he played against Norwegian, like in the Norwegian Pro League. I'm not sure what the talent level is in that league. So you put him against NHLers, how is that going to translate? Is he going to be overwhelmed? And that probably was something that a lot of these teams and scouts were weighing, right? So that's the only thing I think you look at with Solberg, and you can have some solace with him not being the selection. And but hey, Ben Danford, let's see what he got, right? Let's not sit there and poo-poo the guy and say, what you would have went there. The guy could turn out to be the next big thing. We don't know. Development is not a linear curve, and we'll see how he develops and see if he can be a great draft pick, a great Maple Leaf for a long, long time. All right. Any final comments? Why don't we'll wrap up the draft and we'll stick to we'll do kind of the trades, the other deals, and the rumors on Monday's show. We got a big show lined up ahead of free agency, and that stuff kind of ties into all that, anyways. But in terms of the Maple Leafs draft or the draft in general, you have any final comments you want to make?
No, I think it was clear that what the Leafs were looking to do, what they needed to do, and yeah, let's see if Wes Clark and the group can pull another gem, another genie or gem out of the bottle with
Would be nice.
Ben Danford.
Would be nice. I think, a theme, size. Size was a theme, not just for the Maple Leafs, but for the draft in general. Lots and lots of big boys selected in the draft. Big boy hockey is back. That I can confirm. So that was kind of one theme that I noticed throughout the entire draft, and certainly for the Maple Leafs. Outside of Johansson, who's very, very small, lots of size and lots of weight on pretty well the rest of these guys. All right, that'll do it for us here on this bonus episode, a draft breakdown edition of the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. It's Free Agent Frenzy. We will be previewing everything and kind of take a look back at some of the big trades that were made on a wild day 2 of the draft and how that could influence Free Agent Frenzy as well. So make sure that you are ready for that show on Monday. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.